I'm going to tell you a little bit about the noteworthy features at the site. The community itself is over 2 square miles in size, and it contains multiple multi-story great houses. It's got a great Kiva, some road features entering into the village, a reservoir. There's a tower Kiva. It was noted by Morgan in 1870, and it was excavated in 1932 by a Mesa Verde archaeologist. And it's a very interesting structure. It has some, I don't know what these features are, but you can see them in the Tower Kiva at Chetroketl. They almost look like ovens of some sort. But there's another structure similar to it, but what it is a 10th century tower with that became a tri-wall structure. At the site center, there are 6 major drainages that drain and converge into the McCummel Creek within a mile of the site itself. So that's created some incredibly good opportunities for food production. And if you look at those areas to the south of the site today, you can see that they remain productive lands, primarily for hay, but there are other things grown. During 2014 and 2015, we've been focusing on a 50 by 40 meter section of the site center that we have found to have at least 500 years of continuous or near continuous occupation. And the reason why we're interested in that is we're looking at the reasons why great houses appear where they appear. In this case, this great house appeared in the plaza of 2 room blocks, one of them dating to the apparently to the early 800s, another one to the mid 800s, one in front of the other, and at least one of those room blocks overlies some basket maker 3 structures or features. There's also a pit room out there dating to the basket maker 3 period, and other than these curvilinear room blocks, there are some other interesting features around the plaza of this great house and this tri-wall structure. So in our study of this area and the area around the great house center, we've found that we've documented over 100 unit pueblos, a lot of them up the drainages that drain into the Mitchell Springs Community Center, and they confirm that in the 800s there was just a population explosion, probably related to floodwater farming techniques arriving in the area. Public architecture out there, I mentioned some of those features that we've looked at so far. Make sure I get my place right. So I want to give you a little chronology of this area that we're looking at. We talked about the basket maker 3 period. Underneath the tri-wall structure, there's a early 800s room block underneath the tri-wall structure. And in the center, beneath the center of the tri-wall, is a 900s era early Kiva, no masonry. It essentially resembles a tube in the ground. There are no roof supports, there's no pilasters. It's just a plastered surface. And interestingly, there are etchings like a mural on the plaster of this structure. And in subsequent times, what happened is they created a single wide scaffold walled tower over the top of this Kiva. And this tower appears to have been at least 3 meters tall and possibly as tall as 6 meters tall. It too was not a Kiva, but they did, after that tower fell down, they built onto it the middle wall of the tri-wall to hold up what remained of this tower. And they created buttresses to hold up the remaining part. And so the tri-wall, we found out, did not set out, the people that built it apparently did not set out to build a tri-wall. What they set out to build was first a Kiva, then a tower on top of the Kiva, both of them resembling tubes, and a wall that surrounded it, and they created platforms on the east side of it probably at the top of the first floor rooms of the adjacent great house. After they put they stood the tower back up, they added post 1100s type masonry, the dimpled McElmo style masonry on top of this scaffold, single wide wall masonry, and they built it up even further. We have articulated walls falling away from this structure that still have the mortar pads in place, and they haven't spread out, so we have a really good idea of how tall this structure was. So after they put this Chacoan style Kiva inside of this structure, they made some remodelings. They put a foot drum in there, and they took out the subfloor ventilator and put in an above floor ventilator. And interestingly, one of the last things that happened is they re-excavated the 900s Kiva, cleaned it out to the floor. There were literally no floor sherds in the section of the structure that we could see at all. But what we did have are basket loads of roofs of other structures. And I've written a little bit about this in structure and animal sacrifice, ritual closings. This appears to be on similar lines. They used this material, and the ceramics that were in this material were all Mesa Verde and McElmo black on white as far as diagnostic pottery, which is a couple hundred years too late. So this confused us. We couldn't figure it out, and then we finally could find the stratigraphy that showed what happened. And what they did in that early Kiva was very interesting. When they excavated it out, there were no wind and water-laid sediments in this structure. It was two events, basketfuls of roof, and one of the goals was to cover up the mural that was etched on the side of this. And they did it, and then they added another set in two events, bringing the level of that early Kiva up to the height of the the Chacoan style Kiva in the center of it. Then they dismantled part of the foot drum, and we could not understand what was going on there, but when the foot drum collapsed a little more, what we found was what apparently was an offering that was, when this structure was re-excavated, there was an offering put in it in around 1200. And the last thing that happened in this structure is, it was so tall there was no trash being thrown into it. It was very, very interesting. But the chamber, the outer chamber that was appended after two additions to the great house, they appended the outer wall of the tri-wall, and thereby making it a tri-wall. The structures around the tri-wall all appear to be facing that same plaza. So there was a really powerful piece of ground there, obviously. And the Chacoan style Kiva had a mural on it. It was probably 250 years after the Kiva beneath it was filled up. And the mural that was painted on this Kiva was very similar to the design that was etched into the Kiva 250 to 300 years before it.
Wow.
So we're looking at that, and there's so many different designs that you see on Kivas. This is not an unpopular design, but it is interesting that out of all the choices they could make, it was basically the same choice 250 years later. So I want to talk to you as we're looking at some of these structures around this great house. We've also been looking at a pit structure that's very deep and has a fairly short history. It appears to be related to one of the room blocks that surround the great house. And one of the things that I've written about and talked about extensively over the last several years are ritual abandonment of these structures. And at Mitchell Springs, there's numerous instances of this. And this structure 25 that we're working on now, it's a deep pit structure, as I said, is one of these structures. It has a number of cosmological markers inside of it, north niche, west niche, south niche. It has wooden racks that were standing up over the ventilator and over the top of the wing wall. It had a number of baskets on the floor and other textiles, partial sandals. On the north side of the wing wall, interestingly, what they did is they burned this structure. As soon as they abandoned it, they placed at least 6 accelerant piles on the floor to make sure they could get that heat up, and they burned it really well. We've got, I've counted now, almost 500 dendro samples with outer tree rings that are not poplar type species, so we should get some really good dates out of this. On the north side of the wing wall, I started to talk about some of the abandonment behavior that went on inside of this structure. It's really interesting because to the west side of the room there were baskets that were full of corn, and this corn was far larger than any other corn that I see in excavations at Champagne Spring or Mitchell Spring. These were 15 centimeters and longer. Most of the cobs that we find are about that long, but these were in the neighborhood of this long. And interestingly, underneath these baskets of corn was some sort of an apparatus that they had built, possibly an altar. I've had a few people suggest this. They shaped probably about 150 sticks that all shaped the same, and they were lashed together with a leather-like substance or tie of some sort, and they were underneath these baskets. There was also an Abajo red on orange bowl, partial bowl in there that would, if we have the rest of it, we haven't excavated the entire structure, it would be around this big and about this deep. It's the largest bowl I've seen from that time period in that area. Next to that were the right and left radius of a bobcat laying side by side with a cloud blower pipe and an heirloom projectile point. This seemed to be focused on an inlaid anvil stone, which would have been the equivalent of a workbench for these people, and you could see different areas where they did different things on this stone. And just to the north of that was a ceramic feather box that was also a Bajo red on orange. More baskets full of corn, more of these shaped sticks lashed together. And this structure was built apparently into what it may have been a mineral mine, because inside of it, when they excavated this, they pulled out lots of kaolin, limonite, red ochre, yellow ochre, and we found these markers on the floor around the heart. There was red ochre to the west, there was yellow ochre to the north, there was this fist-sized ball of kaolin to the northwest, right on the northwest, and just to the east of that, interestingly, were 2 more basketfuls of corn and another pipe made out of travertine that was in a bag, that was in a basket. And there's other structures out there, including a large structure beneath the Great Kiva. This dates to 753, I believe. We have a huge group of dates. It was also ceremonially closed, burned, similar type of arrangements of objects on the floor. Other structures we know have animal heads in them on the floors as part of the ritual abandonment. We see that out there in a couple of different places. So we have a field trip out there on Sunday. If any of you would like to see what's going on, it's going to be a short walk because it's all in a very small area, and hope to see some of you out there. Thank you.